Welcome to our May edition of A Seat at the Table. I'm Bishop John Dolan, and normally we would have Joyce here to host this wonderful inter-religious and ecumenical conversation of A Seat at the Table. But this Sunday is the Feast of Pentecost, and it's a time for us to focus on the Holy Spirit who gathers us together, people of all cultures and races and tongues. And it's a wonderful celebration coming out of the Acts of the Apostles, where people from various nations were gathered together, and everyone seemed to understand each other by the power and the grace of the Holy Spirit. Here in the Diocese of Phoenix, we are also blessed to have so many cultures and people of various tongues gathered together under the power and the inspiration of the Spirit. And I am happy to have with us at this table three very important people to me here in the Diocese of Phoenix who work here at the Diocesan Pastoral Center and elsewhere. But to my immediate right is Dr. Maria Chavira, the Chancellor and Vice Moderator of the Curia for the Diocese of Phoenix. And thank you very much for being here. And to my immediate left is Father Andrew McNair. He is the Director of Black Catholic Ministry for the Diocese of Phoenix and the pastor of St. Josephine Paquita Mission Parish here again in Phoenix. And then we also have Dr. Ann Vargas-Leveriza, who is the Director for the Office of Child and Youth Protection and our Safe Environment Training for the Diocese of Phoenix. I welcome each of you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, given that this is the Feast of Pentecost, it's really a time for us to focus on the Holy Spirit. We want to focus, too, on how we are a dynamic church, not only because we're all spirit-driven, but also because we come from our various cultures. And maybe just, if you could just explain, maybe we could take one person at a time, maybe with you, Dr. Chavira. What was it like growing up? You grew up in Tucson, right?
Correct.
But and with a particular culture, of the Latino culture. Maybe can you tell us a little bit about that? What was that like for you growing up here?
Sure. I'd love to do that, Bishop. And thank you again for having me. I think one of the big things that comes to my mind is language. I grew up, with my sister. She's 11 months younger than I am. And our first language was Spanish. And so I remember very early on through the language that we would, talk about our faith. We would share music. We would share food. And language was a big part of it. And then I went into kindergarten and realized that I was not allowed to speak Spanish. And so very quickly I learned that language is an important part of who it is that I was. And so that's been part of growing up here and part of who it is that I am.
Thank you. That's language is essential to this. And now, what about you, Dr. Ann? What you're a Filipina?
Yes,
and why don't you tell us a little bit about how did you come here to this diocese, or were you born here?
No, I was actually born and raised in the Philippines.
Okay.
So right in the heart of Manila. And I came out here to live out here in the Diocese of Phoenix in 2003. So, growing up in the Philippines is very interesting. I think language is also very similar, actually. I remember being told we weren't allowed to speak Tagalog anymore and we only had to speak English. But, one big thing in, growing up in the Philippines, the church in itself is very much influenced. I mean, that has influenced the whole country. And so even the holidays and church holidays are holidays itself in the Philippines, like even government holidays acknowledges that. And so very much immersed in everywhere you go, it just felt like, like you knew everybody was automatically Catholic, and that's how it felt. And so very different from where I am.
Right.
living now. Yeah.
And when did you arrive here?
2003.
Oh, okay. So you're still
As an adult.
As an adult,
Married
yeah.
woman with one child. Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
A bit of a culture shock for you?
Yes and no. My father is American, and
Right.
so he was in the Air Force, and so obviously we were very much exposed. Like my brother and I, we would visit family out in Massachusetts, and from time to time, so we were exposed to it.
Right.
So I knew what it was like, or how it would be like living out here. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. And Father Andrew, I know that you're relatively new to the Diocese of Phoenix. When did you arrive? I forget.
2020.
2020. What about your upbringing and how was that? You came from, where were you born and raised?
Swansboro, North Carolina.
Oh, okay. North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And what was that like for you?
Mm-hmm. I think in the South, and particularly within the Black community, what is highlighted first is the community.
Right.
And your relationship to the community. So particularly I wasn't raised Catholic, so within the Black Christian church, there was a safe place of self-expression.
Right.
And that's where I learned to aspire, to dream, to want, to grow, to mature, all that sort of thing. So it was within that framework of the community that made me who I am.
Right. And you brought a lot of your history and your culture here to the Diocese of Phoenix, and we've been truly blessed under Bishop Olmsted. He found kind of a good friend in you in that you were wanting to really up the game for the Black Catholic community here in the Diocese of Phoenix. And I think you've done an amazing job, particularly at Josephine Bakhita Mission, Parish Mission. And that's been a real blessing to just watch that continue to grow. And but I'm wondering, what are some of the traditions that are unique to your cultures that could offer a little wow factor to the diocese?
Well, Bishop, one of the things in my family, we go back many, many generations before, Arizona was even a state. Mm-hmm. And so the faith has been something that was just part of our family. My grandfather was instrumental in building the Adobe Mission at Fort Lowell in Tucson. And so one of the big things right away in the beginning was, I remember, processions.
Right.
And as my grandparents got older, there was a devotion to Santo Niño.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so every Christmas, my grandmother would gather all the family around, and we would say a rosary on Christmas Eve. And I remember as a kid, I would get really upset because, she'd do this big, long litany, and I didn't know what she was, saying. And I wanted to open presents and eat food. But those little examples very early on were those little seeds, right, from my faith that just sparked curiosity. And so those traditions are modified, but still continue in different ways.
I love that.
Yeah.
How about, you had Santo Niño as well, right?
And I was going to mention that too. My mom grew up from the South in the Philippines. And so the town that she grew up in is very dedicated to Santo Niño. And so as kids, we would visit, but she really ingrained that in us. And so, I remember as a kid, she asked me to dance the sinulog. It's a dance that they do during the Feast of Santo Niño, which is January 15th. And you basically do, you dance with the Santo Niño, and then you process going inside the church. And I just remember that vividly, but, it's amazing. But they do it every year. It's the whole town celebrating. It's a feast. And so it's just fun. It's a glorious time.
That's fantastic. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's something I haven't experienced. I had been in a number of predominant Filipino parishes in San Diego where I had been, and I don't remember that, but we had Simbanga B, and I'm happy to say that we're going to resurrect that here at the Basilica of St. Mary's.
Yeah.
And it looks like the Filipino priests are already working to make that happen this coming Christmas.
Yeah.
But what about you, Father?
Something that in my childhood that really sticks out, and particularly in the Black community there, is the family reunion. If you've never been to a Black family reunion, it's absolutely amazing because at the same time you can look backwards and forward in time, through the elders as well as through the young. So you see the future and the past at the same time, and you meet actual people, and you have lots of food, music, singing, spirituality, art. The family reunion is something that's very dear within the Black community. And I always look forward to it. So you would kind of bring everybody together of your bloodline and of your families, and to know them and experience history and the future through them.
That's something that is lost here, I think. We don't see family reunions. Our family reunion was going back to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where my folks grew up. And we enjoyed that. That was something very important for us to kind of connect with our roots, our family roots. And but what are, as you look at honoring these cultural traditions, how do you see that enhancing your own faith? Like you talked a little bit about the family reunion, that obviously has a connection to faith.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And at every family union, God is at the center.
Right.
God is invoked. There's always prayer.
Right.
It tends to be a long prayer. But it's all about the faith of the people, that God that gives us hope, that gives us resilience, and that makes us one.
Right.
So at the heart of the family reunion is not just a social event, but it's a very spiritual event. And yeah.
Do you find that some of those like those childhood experiences that you kind of talked about, do you find that some of those are carried on in your home today? Would you say?
I would say they're modified.
Yeah,
because there's been kind of a melting of my husband's traditions and my traditions.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So you kind of bring both of them together, and you develop new traditions, right? So as we had Santo Niño, that was a big part of my childhood. We instilled with the children sort of laying down of the baby Jesus on Christmas Eve. And so that wasn't my idea. That was actually my husband's idea.
Right.
But it became part of our tradition as they were really young kids. Right. And we would read the Christmas story. And on Christmas Eve, one of the kids, usually the oldest, would put the baby Jesus in the manger. So it's a little modified, but
that's fantastic. Yeah, I love that. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess not so much. I mean, I really couldn't dance the sinulog here, but I do think.
How about Pininkling?
It's been a while.
Okay.
But I believe there is a parish, though, that does the sinulog. So I will find that for you.
I would love to see that.
Yeah. Like we do have the statue of Santo Niño at home. I remember bringing that with me when we moved out here. And so it's there. It's been introduced to the kids. That's something. I know that one thing that I have brought with me and I continue to do is just the devotions, like the novenas. Filipinos are they're really suckers for novenas, praying the novenas. And so that's something I've learned very early on and I continue to do. And that has been introduced in my family too.
Yeah. I'm thinking too about the value of the various cultures represented here in the Diocese of Phoenix, not only in the state and the city and the county, but also in our diocese. One thing that I seem to recognize in each of your stories and also cultures is family is so essential.
Yes.
Family is essential, more than I mean, it was important for us. I mean, as kids, and certainly I value my family, but I find in some ways it's not necessarily essential. What I noticed that in kind of this American, and maybe it's a uh, uh, European American concept, but there's this value to go and be somebody else and to be sort of your own person. Where I see that, and I've heard this for many years, that in the Latino tradition, the Filipino tradition, family is first, and more than anything, and that blood runs thick. And I think that's a fantastic thing. My mom used to always say that blood runs thick in our family, but I didn't always find that to be true. I find that to be true in other cultures. But what other values would your cultures bring to our culture here in the diocese?
Like from the Filipino perspective, hospitality.
Yeah, yes.
I think Filipinos are just so good with that. They're great hosts.
Right.
I think if you've never been into a Filipino's house, like, try it. Hopefully you get invited one of these days. But the amount of hospitality and the way that they take care of their guests, something we could definitely learn.
Yeah, I learned never to leave an empty spot on my plate because they would fill it. So I just nibbled it took me a while to figure that out, but I always had a very full plate because if it was empty just a little bit, it would be filled very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also find that at Baquita, Baquita, the parish, I find that level of hospitality is so important. It's not just an ordinary coffee and donuts, after Mass. I find that you roll out a lot of the food and people gather. It's a great experience. I love that.
No, it's a family spirit. There's no doubt about it. There's genuine connections there going on.
And just recently we had I was so amazed the story of the Saint is it St. William's that the church burned down, but so they went to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And it was as if nothing happened. The community was just heavily involved. It was, they brought out all the food. There was singing, there was dancing. That level of church was greater than the church building. And I just found that within at least that's what I had heard. I haven't been there yet because I was away, but the Latino community just came together. Church is about people and family more than it was about the structure. The structure can come and go.
Right. Yeah. And Our Lady of Guadalupe is a big, big part of, our faith.
Yeah.
And I believe that's a big gift, I believe, that our culture shares to the Catholic faith. She appeared in Mexico City in 1531, and that's part of, appearing to the people there. It's just been such a strength of what we bring into our faith. The other piece I kind of think about is you kind of think about our Blessed Mother in that regard, is she was a very humble woman. And I see that as part of some of the people in our lives, in our culture, like our grandparents, very, very humble.
Right.
They have big influence, but they're humble.
The humility is a huge piece of the whole puzzle, right? Well, I want to say thank you very much for being here, and I hope and pray that your Pentecost event is going to be a joyful time for you. It is a time for us to gather in the Spirit. And so my prayers are for you, and may the Holy Spirit continue to sustain you and animate you to be the best Christian you can be.